They told her she would marry a stranger in 15 minutes. They told this 21-year-old virgin that her carefully planned life had shattered like glass against stone. That duty demanded she step into a dead woman's shoes, or rather a dead man's wedding. They told Serafina Ashwood her fate was sealed. They were wrong. The Alpha King standing in her doorway was not looking for a convenient replacement. He was not settling for second best or accepting obligation. He was hunting, and she was exactly what he had been searching for. The wedding dress felt like a cage. Serafina stood before the full-length mirror in her childhood bedroom, staring at a stranger. Layers of ivory silk and antique lace cascaded down her small frame, each fold another bar trapping her in a future she had not chosen. Her platinum blonde hair had been swept into an elaborate updo by servants whose hands shook with pity. Her pale skin looked translucent against the white fabric, almost ghostly. 21 years old and still untouched. Still innocent in ways that made the pack whisper behind cupped hands. Still waiting for something she could not name. Until 3 hours ago, she had been promised to Kieran Thorne, the beta's son, a perfectly acceptable match for the daughter of the pack's third-ranking family. Boring, predictable Kieran, who had never made her pulse race, who had kissed her exactly 3 times in their 2-year courtship, chased pecs that felt more like obligation than desire. She had resigned herself to a lifetime of tepid affection, of dutiful coupling, of never knowing what it felt like to burn. Then the messenger arrived. Serafina could still see him in her mind's eye, mud-splattered and pale, stumbling into the estate's great hall, where 200 guests had already gathered for the ceremony. His voice had cracked when he delivered the news. Kieran Thorne was dead, killed during a border skirmish with rogues. His body barely recovered in time for proper burial rites. The attack had been sudden, vicious. 5 warriors sent to patrol the northern boundary. Only 2 returned. The wedding, already planned and paid for with the pack's considerable funds, could not be canceled. Not without tremendous loss of face. Not without wasting resources the pack could ill afford. Her parents had spent 6 months preparing, had invited wolves from across the northern territories, had made promises and arrangements that could not simply be unmade because the groom was dead. So the council made a decision. The wedding would proceed as planned, just with a different groom. A knock at the door made Serafina flinch. Her mother entered, already dressed in formal ceremonial robes, her expression carefully neutral as she took in her daughter's appearance. "You look beautiful," she said softly, adjusting a fold in the dress that did not need adjusting. "The council has made their choice." Serafina's throat tightened. "Who?" Her mother's hand stilled. For a moment, something like awe flickered across her face. "The Alpha King himself." The words hung in the air like smoke. Lucian Nightraven, the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories, the ruler of 5 packs spanning hundreds of miles, a male whose name was spoken with reverence and fear in equal measure. And he had agreed to take Kieran's place, to bind himself to a common Omega she had never met, to fulfill the obligations of a wedding that had nothing to do with him. "Why?" Serafina whispered. "Why would he?" "I do not know." Her mother's voice was barely audible. "But he is here, and you will meet him in 10 minutes before the ceremony begins." The room tilted. 10 minutes. She was going to meet her husband, the Alpha King, in 10 minutes. Then she would walk down the aisle and bind herself to him for life. Serafina's hands trembled as she pressed them against her stomach, trying to calm the nausea rising in her throat. This was not how it was supposed to happen. She was supposed to marry Kieran. "Tonight may be overwhelming," her mother continued quietly. "The first time is often difficult, even with a gentle partner. But with someone like him, someone who knows exactly what he is doing, the pleasure will far outweigh any pain." Serafina could not find words. Her mother had never spoken to her like this before, never acknowledged the physical realities of what would happen tonight. "Trust your instincts," her mother said. "Let him lead. And remember, he expects nothing from you except honesty." Before Serafina could respond, another knock sounded at the door. Sharper, more authoritative. Her mother stepped back, straightening her robes. "Enter." The door opened, and Lucian Nightraven walked into her life like he owned it, like he owned everything. Serafina forgot how to breathe. He was taller than she had expected, easily 6.5 feet of pure muscle and predatory grace. Dark hair fell to his shoulders unbound, framing a face that was all sharp angles and hard edges. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. But it was his eyes that made her knees weaken. Pale blue, almost silver, like winter ice catching moonlight. And when those eyes locked on hers, the intensity in them was enough to make her take an involuntary step backward. He wore black, formal dress that probably cost more than her family's entire estate. The fabric stretched across shoulders that could break a man in half without effort. Power radiated from him in waves that made her omega nature want to bare her throat in submission. This was not a male. This was an apex predator barely contained in human skin. Her mother curtsied low. "Your Majesty, thank you for your generosity in this difficult time." Lucian's gaze never left Serafina. He said nothing to her mother, did not even acknowledge the other woman's presence. "Leave us." It was not a request. Serafina's mother hesitated for only a heartbeat before obeying. The door closed with a soft click that sounded impossibly loud in the sudden silence. They were alone. Lucian took a step closer, then another. He moved with the fluid confidence of someone who had never been denied anything in his life, who had never needed to ask permission. Serafina's heart hammered against her ribs so hard she was certain he could hear it. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, close enough that she could smell him. Pine, snow, something wild and untamed that made heat coil low in her belly. "Your name is Serafina." His voice was deep, rough, not asking, stating. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. His gaze traveled slowly down her body, taking in every curve visible beneath the wedding dress, lingering on her mouth, her throat, the soft swell of her breasts beneath the lace bodice. When his eyes returned to hers, they had darkened with something that made her breath catch. "You are untouched." Again, not a question, but she nodded anyway, heat creeping up her neck and staining her cheeks with color that she knew he could see. Something predatory flashed across his face. Satisfaction, possession, hunger. Good. He took another step closer, so close now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the faint scars that marked his throat and hands, evidence of battles fought and won. "Do you know why I agreed to this?" he asked softly. Serafina shook her head, unable to form words under the weight of his attention. "Because the moment I heard about Kieran Thorne's death, I knew." His hand rose and one finger traced along her jawline with devastating gentleness. "I knew the goddess had intervened, that she had removed an obstacle standing between me and something I needed." "I do not understand," Serafina whispered. "You will." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and electricity sparked where his skin touched hers. A jolt so intense that she gasped audibly. Lucian's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. His hands stilled. Then his expression shifted into something Serafina could not read. Shock. Wonder. And beneath it all, a bone-deep certainty that terrified her. "Impossible," he breathed. "What?" Her voice shook. "What is impossible?" He did not answer. Instead, his hand moved to cup her face, tilting it up toward him. His thumb traced her cheekbone with a reverence that contradicted the raw hunger in his eyes. "Tonight," he said, his voice dropping even lower, "I am going to show you what your body was made for. I am going to touch you in places no one has ever touched. I am going to make you come apart beneath my hands until you are shaking with pleasure you never knew existed." Heat flooded through Serafina's core. Her thighs clenched involuntarily. "And then," Lucian continued, leaning down until his mouth was inches from her ear, "when you are desperate and begging, when you cannot think of anything except how badly you need to be filled, I am going to claim every inch of you. I am going to show you exactly why fingers could never stretch you the way I can." His words painted vivid pictures in her mind. Serafina felt wetness gathering between her legs, soaking through her undergarments. She had never felt anything like this. Never experienced needs so intense it bordered on pain. "Do you understand what I am telling you, Serafina?" His breath was hot against her ear. "Your body recognizes mine, even if you do not yet understand why." Before she could respond, he stepped back. The sudden absence of his nearness felt like a physical loss. "The ceremony begins in 5 minutes. His voice was steady, again controlled. "When you walk down that aisle, remember this: you are not marrying a stranger. You are claiming what was always meant to be yours." Then he turned and left. The door closed behind him, and Serafina's legs finally gave out. She sank onto the edge of her bed, gasping for air, her entire body trembling. What just happened? That electric spark when he touched her. The way her body had responded to his proximity, like metal to a magnet. The absolute certainty in his voice when he said her body recognized his. She did not understand, but deep in her bones, in a place that had nothing to do with logic, she knew he was right. The ceremony was a blur of ritual and binding oaths. Serafina walked down the aisle on her father's arm, acutely aware of the 200 guests watching her with expressions ranging from pity to fascination. They had come to witness her marry Kieran Thorne. Instead, they would see her bind herself to a king. Lucian waited at the altar, imposing in his formal black attire. His expression was unreadable as she approached, but his eyes never left hers. When her father placed her hand in Lucian's, that same electric current sparked between them, stronger this time, strong enough that several people in the front row gasped audibly. The officiant began the traditional words, vows of loyalty and protection, promises to honor the pack and produce strong heirs, obligations that would bind them together until death. Serafina heard herself speaking the responses as if from a great distance. Her entire focus had narrowed to the male standing before her, to the warmth of his large hand engulfing hers, to the mate bond that was forming between them with every word spoken, because that was what this was. She understood it now, even without anyone explaining it to her. The goddess had not simply led Lucian to this wedding. She had orchestrated Kieran's death, had arranged circumstances so that Serafina would be standing here binding herself to her true mate instead of settling for a comfortable lie. When the officiant instructed Lucian to claim his bride with a kiss, Serafina expected something formal, chaste, appropriate for the hundreds of witnesses. She should have known better. Lucian's hand moved to the small of her back, pulling her flush against his hard body. His other hand cupped her face with surprising gentleness, and then he kissed her. Not a peck, not appropriate in any sense of the word. His mouth claimed hers with devastating thoroughness, lips coaxing hers apart, tongue sliding against hers in a rhythm that made her core clench with need. He tasted like power and possession and something darkly sweet that made her want to whimper. She felt his tongue teaching her the rhythm, felt herself responding instinctively, kissing him back with an enthusiasm that should have embarrassed her. The pack was watching, 200 wolves witnessing their alpha king devour his new bride's mouth like he was claiming her soul. She did not care. Heat exploded through her body so intense that her knees buckled. Lucian held her up effortlessly, one arm banding around her waist, supporting her entire weight, while he continued to kiss her like the audience did not exist. When he finally pulled back, Serafina was gasping for air. Her lips felt swollen and wet. Her body trembled with needs she did not fully understand. Lucian's eyes had darkened to storm cloud gray. His chest rose and fell with barely controlled breaths. Mine, he growled low enough that only she could hear. And the mate bond snapped into place with such force that Serafina cried out. It was like a golden thread connecting her heart to his. Unbreakable. Eternal. She could feel his emotions now. The fierce possessiveness. The barely leashed desire. And beneath it all, wonder that mirrored her own. The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. I present to you Alpha King Lucian Night Raven and his mate Luna Queen Serafina. The pack erupted in applause and ceremonial howls. But Serafina barely heard them. She was too busy trying to process what had just happened. True mates. They were true mates. The goddess had not just led Lucian here. She had orchestrated everything: Kieran's death, the wedding that could not be canceled, even the timing to ensure that Serafina and Lucian found each other. Lucian's hand tightened on hers. Through the bond, she felt his satisfaction, his certainty. He had known. From the moment he walked into her room and felt that electric spark, he had known what she was to him. And he had claimed her anyway, without hesitation, without doubt. They walked back down the aisle together as the pack celebrated around them. Serafina caught her mother's eye in the crowd, saw tears streaming down the older woman's face. Tears of joy, not sorrow. Her mother had known too, had recognized the signs. As they exited the ceremonial hall into the antechamber, Lucian pulled Serafina aside into a private alcove. His hands framed her face, tilting it up toward him. You feel it now, he said softly. The bond. Yes, her voice shook. We are fated mates, he finished. The goddess chose us for each other long before we were born. Kieran was never meant to have you. You were always mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made her feel cherished, protected, claimed in the best possible way. I do not understand why the goddess would... She trailed off, unsure how to articulate the question. Why she would kill an innocent male to bring us together. Lucian's expression darkened. I do not have that answer, but I know this: you were never meant for him. Every moment you spent believing you would marry Kieran Thorne was a moment stolen from us. His thumb traced her lower lip again, and Serafina felt fresh heat pool between her thighs. We have a feast to attend, Lucian murmured. Hours of political theater and empty congratulations. And the entire time I am going to touch you beneath the table where no one can see. I am going to make you wet and desperate and aching. Serafina's breath hitched, because when we finally retire to our chambers, He continued, his voice dropping to that dark rumble that made her shiver. I want you absolutely desperate for what I am going to do to you. Before she could respond, he released her and offered his arm. They had a feast to attend, and Serafina had never been more terrified or exhilarated in her entire life. The feast was exquisite torture. Serafina sat beside Lucian at the high table elevated above the rest of the guests, trying to maintain composure while her new mate systematically destroyed her self-control. His hand rested on her thigh beneath the table, hidden from view by the elaborate tablecloth. To anyone watching, they appeared to be the picture of propriety, a newly mated pair making polite conversation with their guests. No one could see Lucian's fingers tracing slow patterns on her skin through the silk of her dress, moving higher with each pass, edging closer to the junction of her thighs where she was already embarrassingly wet. Eat, he murmured against her ear during a lull in the congratulations. You are going to need your strength. Serafina tried to focus on the food before her. Roasted venison and honey-glazed vegetables, delicacies prepared specifically for this occasion. But her appetite had transformed into something else entirely, a hunger that had nothing to do with the feast spread before them. She managed a few bites while pack members approached to offer their congratulations. Most seemed genuinely happy about the unexpected pairing. A few looked nervous, as if uncertain how to address a common Omega who had just become their Luna Queen. Then Ravenna Silvermoon approached. Serafina had known Ravenna her entire life. The daughter of Elder Silvermoon, one of the most powerful council members. Beautiful, wealthy, and ambitious. Ravenna had made no secret of her desire to become Lucian's mate. Your Majesty? Ravenna curtsied low before Lucian, her dress cut scandalously low to display ample cleavage. What a surprising turn of events. I had no idea you were even attending the wedding. The goddess works in mysterious ways, Lucian replied, his tone bored. Ravenna's smile did not reach her eyes as she turned to Serafina. And Serafina, such a shock this must be for you. To go from marrying a beta to becoming queen in a single afternoon. The words were sweet. The tone was poison. I am honored by the goddess's choice, Serafina replied carefully. Of course. Ravenna's gaze flickered to where Lucian's hand rested on Serafina's thigh, though she could not see what it was doing beneath the table. Though I imagine the transition will be challenging. There is so much a common Omega would not understand about royal responsibilities. Lucian's hand tightened possessively on Serafina's leg. Through the bond, she felt his anger spike. Lady Ravenna, his voice was cold enough to frost glass. My mate's bloodline is irrelevant to her ability to serve as Luna Queen. The goddess chose her. That is the only qualification that matters. Color flooded Ravenna's cheeks. Of course, Your Majesty. I meant no disrespect. Then you should choose your words more carefully in the future. He dismissed her with a subtle nod. You may go. Ravenna retreated, humiliation clear in the rigid set of her shoulders. The moment she was out of earshot, Lucian's fingers slid higher beneath Serafina's dress, brushing against the junction of her thighs. She bit back a gasp. Breathe, he commanded softly, and smile. Everyone is watching. Serafina forced herself to inhale slowly, to relax the tension in her shoulders, to look like a happy bride instead of a female on the edge of losing all control. Lucian's fingers found the edge of her undergarment, slipped beneath the damp silk. This time she could not stop the small sound that escaped her throat. So wet already, he murmured, his voice pitched for her ears alone. I can feel how desperate you are, little Omega. Your body is preparing itself for my invasion, getting slick and ready to be filled. His fingers stroked through her folds, not entering, just teasing, building pressure that made her hips shift involuntarily, seeking more friction. Do you know what it does to me? Lucian continued conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather. Sitting here in front of all these people, knowing you are soaking wet beneath your pretty dress, knowing that in a few hours I'm going to claim every inch of you. Serafina could barely focus on anything except the maddening stroke of his fingers, the way he circled her most sensitive point without quite touching it, the heat building in her core that demanded release. Another pack member approached to offer congratulations. Serafina had no idea what she said in response. Her entire world had narrowed to Lucian's hand between her legs, and the desperate need coiling tighter with every passing second. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 90 minutes, Lucian stood. The conversations around them stuttered to a halt. My mate and I are retiring for the evening, he announced to the assembled pack. His hand rested possessively on Serafina's shoulder. I am sure you understand that we have important matters to attend to. Knowing laughter rippled through the crowd. Serafina's face burned as Lucian helped her stand. Her legs felt unsteady. The wetness between her thighs had soaked through her undergarment completely. She was certain everyone in the hall could smell her arousal. Lucian seemed unbothered by the knowing looks and whispered comments. He guided her through the crowd with one hand at the small of her back, proprietary and confident. They walked through corridors lit by flickering torches, up staircases carved from ancient stone, past guards who averted their eyes respectfully. Serafina had never been to the royal wing before, had never imagined she would have reason to enter these private chambers. Now she was walking toward them as Luna Queen, as Lucian's fated mate, as a virgin about to be thoroughly claimed. Lucian opened the door to his chambers, their chambers now, and guided her inside. The room was massive, masculine and elegant, dominated by a bed that could easily fit 4 people. Dark furs covered the mattress. Heavy curtains blocked out the moonlight. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls. The door closed behind them with a soft click. The lock engaged with a sound that made Serafina's pulse spike with anticipation and fear in equal measure. They were alone. Lucian turned to face her, leaning back against the door. His eyes tracked her every movement as she stood frozen in the center of the room. "Come here," he commanded softly. Serafina's feet moved before her mind could process the order, carrying her across the thick rugs until she stood directly in front of him. This close, she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. The height difference made her feel small, protected, vulnerable. "Do you know what is going to happen tonight, Serafina?" "You are going to claim me," she whispered. "Yes." He reached out and traced one finger along her jawline. "But there is more to it than that. Tonight I am going to teach your body what pleasure truly means. I am going to touch you in ways that will make you scream. I am going to taste every inch of your skin until you are begging me to fill you." His words sent fresh heat flooding through her core. "And then," Lucian continued, his voice dropping even lower, "when you are desperate and trembling, when you cannot think of anything except how badly you need me inside you, I am going to claim you so thoroughly that you will feel me for days afterward." Serafina trembled, not from fear, from overwhelming need that she did not know how to process. "But first," Lucian said, reaching behind her to begin unhooking her dress, "I need to prepare you. You are virgin tight, and I am not a small male. If I tried to take you right now without proper preparation, I would hurt you, and that is the last thing I want." The dress loosened and slipped from her shoulders, pooled at her feet, leaving her standing in just her undergarments. Delicate white silk that did nothing to hide how aroused she was. Lucian's eyes darkened as his gaze traveled slowly down her body, lingering on her breasts, the curve of her waist, the damp evidence of her desire visible through the thin fabric. "Perfect," he breathed, "even better than I imagined." He lifted her effortlessly and carried her to the bed, laid her down gently on the soft furs. Then he stepped back and began removing his own clothes. Serafina watched transfixed as he revealed the body beneath the formal attire. He was magnificent, all hard muscle and warrior scars, broad shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, defined abdomen marked with old battle wounds. When he finally removed his trousers, she got her first look at his arousal, and her eyes widened in shock. He was massive, thick and long and already glistening at the tip. There was no way that would fit inside her. It was impossible. Lucian must have read the panic in her expression, because he smiled slightly as he joined her on the bed. "Do not worry, little Omega." He positioned himself beside her, propped up on one elbow so he could look down at her. "Your body was made to take mine. It just needs to be taught how." His hand began to explore, starting at her throat, tracing the rapid pulse point there, then moving lower to cup her breast through the thin silk. Even through the fabric, his touch made her arch into his palm. "So responsive," he murmured approvingly. "You are going to be exquisite when you finally let go completely." He peeled away her undergarment, baring her chest to his gaze, immediately lowered his head to take one sensitive peek into his mouth. The sensation of his hot, wet mouth closing around her flesh made Serafina cry out. Her hands flew to his hair, uncertain whether to pull him closer or push him away. The pleasure was overwhelming, almost painful in its intensity. Lucian sucked and licked, paying thorough attention to one breast before moving to the other. His hands slid lower, tracing patterns on her stomach before dipping beneath the waistband of her remaining undergarment. When his fingers finally made contact with her slick heat, they both groaned. "Drenched," he said roughly. "You are absolutely drenched for me, Serafina. So wet and ready." His fingers slid through her folds, circling the sensitive bundle of nerves that made her hips buck involuntarily. "Have you ever touched yourself here?" he asked. She shook her head, unable to form words. "Then you have no idea how good I can make you feel." He increased the pressure, circled faster, and Serafina felt something building, coiling tighter and tighter in her core, climbing towards something massive and terrifying. Let go, Lucian commanded. Show me how beautiful you are when you surrender. The pleasure crested, broke. Serafina climaxed with a scream, her entire body convulsing as waves of sensation crashed over her. It went on and on longer than she thought possible until she was sobbing with the overwhelming intensity of it. When she finally came down, gasping and trembling, Lucian was watching her with an expression of fierce satisfaction. That was one, he said. We are going to need at least 2 more before you are ready to take me. And he lowered his head between her thighs to begin the process all over again. Lucian's mouth on her most intimate place shattered every assumption Serafina had ever held about pleasure. His tongue traced through her folds with devastating precision, circling the sensitive bundle of nerves that made her back arch off the bed, sucking gently, licking with broad strokes that had her crying out his name into the darkness of their chamber. Please, she gasped, though she did not know what she was begging for. Please, I cannot. You can. His voice vibrated against her flesh. And you will. I told you, little Omega. 2 more before I claim you. He held her hips down with one strong arm when she tried to thrash, kept her exactly where he wanted her while he feasted. His other hand moved between her legs and she felt one long finger slide inside her. The intrusion burned slightly. Her body was so tight, unused to being breached, but Lucian worked slowly, patiently, moving his finger in and out while his tongue continued its relentless assault on her pearl. The dual sensations were overwhelming, pleasure built in waves, each one higher than the last. Serafina felt herself climbing towards something massive, something that would fundamentally alter her understanding of what her body was capable of experiencing. That's it, Lucian encouraged against her sensitive flesh. Let go for me. Show me how beautiful you are when you surrender completely. He curled his finger inside her, hitting a spot that made stars explode behind her eyes. Serafina climaxed with a scream that echoed off the stone walls. Her inner muscles clamped down rhythmically on his finger. Wave after wave of sensation crashed over her until she was sobbing with the intensity. Through it all, Lucian continued to work her with his mouth and hand, drawing out her release until she was certain she could not survive another moment. When she finally came down, gasping and trembling, he crawled up her body and kissed her deeply. She could taste herself on his lips and tongue, something that should have embarrassed her, but instead made fresh heat pool in her core. That was 2, he murmured against her mouth. 1 more. Before she could protest that she could not possibly climax again, his hand was between her thighs, this time working 3 fingers inside her. The stretch was intense. Her body struggled to accommodate the increased fullness. But along with the burn came pleasure. The friction against her inner walls created sensations that had her hips rocking to meet him, seeking more despite the overwhelming nature of it all. You are doing so well. Lucian praised, his voice rough with barely controlled desire, taking my fingers so beautifully. But I am much thicker than this. I need you, dripping and desperate, before I can give you what we both want. He added a 4th finger, and Serafina felt the stretch acutely, felt her body struggling to accommodate the invasion. Touch yourself, Lucian commanded. Put your fingers on your pearl and make yourself come while I stretch you open. Serafina had never touched herself there before, had been taught such acts were shameful, but under Lucian's intense gaze she could not deny him anything. Her hand moved tentatively between her legs, found the swollen bud that he had been tormenting, began to circle it with shaking fingers. The combination of his 4 fingers inside her and her own touch on her pearl was devastating. Pleasure spiraled through her rapidly. Within minutes, she was climaxing again, harder than the first 2 times. Her inner walls clamped down rhythmically on his driving fingers while she screamed his name. Perfect, Lucian groaned, watching her face while she shattered. Absolutely perfect. He withdrew his fingers slowly and she whimpered at the emptiness, at the ache that demanded to be filled. Lucian positioned himself between her thighs. The thick length of his arousal pressed against her entrance. He looked into her eyes with an intensity that stole her breath. This is going to hurt, he said honestly. You are as prepared as I can make you. But I am going to stretch you wider than you have ever been stretched. Fill you completely. Claim every inch of you for myself. Serafina nodded, unable to form words. Through the mate bond she felt his need, his desire, and beneath it all, genuine care for her comfort despite his overwhelming hunger. He began to push inside. The burning stretch of her body yielding to his invasion made her gasp. He was right, he was much bigger than his fingers, thick and hard and relentless as he worked himself deeper. Breathe, Lucian commanded, holding still when he was halfway in, giving her time to adjust. You are doing so well, taking me so beautifully. Just a little more. He pushed deeper, and Serafina felt something tear inside her as he breached her innocence with one firm thrust that seated him fully. The pain was sharp but brief, quickly giving way to a feeling of impossible fullness, of being stretched and claimed and possessed in the most fundamental way. Lucian groaned deeply, his entire body shaking with the effort of holding still. You feel incredible, he said roughly, so tight around me, gripping me like you never want to let go. He was right. Her body had molded around him perfectly, like they were two pieces of the same whole finally joined. When Lucian began to move, withdrawing slowly before pushing back in the friction, made Serafina moan. Each stroke hit places inside her that sent pleasure radiating through her entire body. He set a rhythm that was gentle at first, careful, giving her time to adjust to the sensation of being filled so completely. But gradually his thrust became harder, faster, more demanding. Serafina's hands clutched at his shoulders, nails digging into the scarred skin. Her legs wrapped around his waist, instinctively pulling him deeper. Touch yourself again, Lucian commanded breathlessly. I want to feel you come around me. Want to feel your body milking me while you scream my name. She obeyed. Her fingers found her swollen pearl and began to circle. The dual sensations, his thick length driving into her and her own touch, pushed her rapidly toward another climax. When Lucian angled his hips to hit that perfect spot inside her, with each thrust, she shattered completely. Her fourth climax was the most intense yet. Her entire body convulsed as pleasure crashed over her in overwhelming waves. She screamed his name exactly as he had predicted, felt her inner walls clamping down rhythmically on his driving shaft. That's it, Lucian growled, his pace increasing as he chased his own release. Come for me. Show me how good I make you feel. She felt him swell even larger inside her, felt him pulse and throb as he found his own completion. Hot liquid flooded her core, seeming to go on forever. When it finally ended, they collapsed together in a tangle of sweat-slicked limbs, both breathing hard, both trembling from the intensity. Lucian rolled them so Serafina was lying on top of him. His softening length remained buried inside her, his arms wrapped around her possessively. That was just the beginning, he murmured against her hair. By morning, you are going to know exactly what every inch of your body was made for. Serafina believed him. Her body was already responding again despite the tenderness, already craving more of what he had just given her. She was his now, completely and irrevocably, and she would not have it any other way. The morning sunlight streaming through the heavy curtains woke Serafina slowly. She was alone in the massive bed, wrapped in soft furs that smelled like Lucian pine and snow and masculine musk that made her core clench with renewed desire despite the delicious ache between her thighs. Every movement reminded her of the night before, of being claimed thoroughly and repeatedly. Lucian had made love to her 4 more times before dawn, each time showing her new positions, new pleasures, new ways her body could respond to his touch. The door opened and Lucian entered carrying a tray laden with food. He was shirtless, wearing only loose sleep pants that rode low on his hips, revealing the defined muscles of his abdomen and the dark trail of hair that disappeared beneath the waistband. Just looking at him made heat pool low in Serafina's belly. Good morning, little Omega. He set the tray on the bedside table before joining her on the bed. How are you feeling? Sorry, she admitted quietly. But good, really good. Lucian smiled and pulled the furs away from her body, bearing her completely to his gaze. No hiding from me, he said firmly. I want to see what I did to you last night. Want to see the evidence of my claiming. His eyes traveled over her naked form, lingering on the love bites and finger-shaped bruises on her hips from where he had gripped her during their passionate encounters. She bore the marks of his possession, and instead of feeling ashamed, she felt cherished. You are going to be tender today, Lucian said, his hand sliding between her thighs to cup her sensitive core. But that does not mean we are done exploring what your body can do. He began to stroke her gently, his fingers sliding through folds that were still slick from the night before. Serafina gasped at the contact, her body instantly responding despite the soreness. Within minutes, he had her climaxing again, proving that passion could survive tenderness. That desire only grew stronger with familiarity rather than fading. They spent the entire day in their chambers, learning each other's bodies, exploring preferences and boundaries. Lucian taught her to ride him, to take control of her own pleasure while he watched with hungry eyes. He showed her the exquisite torture of being taken against the wall, her legs wrapped around his waist while he drove up into her with powerful thrusts. Each new experience pushed Serafina further from the innocent virgin she had been and closer to the confident woman she was becoming. But it was not just physical. As they explored each other's bodies, they also began to learn each other's minds and hearts. Lucian told her about the loneliness of being Alpha King, of having the weight of 5 packs on his shoulders with no one to truly share the burden. Serafina confessed her fears of not being good enough, of being just a replacement bride rather than someone chosen. You were chosen, Lucian assured her that first night as they lay tangled together after another intense session. Not by me initially, but by the goddess herself. Mate bonds do not form by accident, Serafina. She knew exactly what she was doing when she brought us together. Serafina wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this connection between them was more than just convenience or physical chemistry. But old insecurities died hard. The honeymoon period lasted exactly 1 week. 7 days of remaining in their chambers, of learning each other, of building the foundation of what would become an unbreakable bond. But on the 8th day duty called, Serafina had responsibilities as Luna Queen, pack members who needed her intercession, political realities she could no longer ignore. The council meeting that afternoon was her first official appearance in her new role. She sat beside Lucian at the head of the massive table. 12 council members arranged around them, alphas and elders who had ruled the Northern Territories for decades. Most seemed genuinely pleased to have her there, offering congratulations and pledging their support. But not all. Elder Thaddeus Greystone sat directly across from her, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. He had been on the council longer than Serafina had been alive, and he made his disapproval clear. "Your Majesty," he said, addressing Lucian while pointedly ignoring Serafina, "while we all appreciate the fortuitous circumstances that led to your mating, we must discuss the implications of having a common Omega in the Luna Queen position." The temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Lucian's hand found Serafina's beneath the table, squeezed reassuringly. "Elder Greystone," his voice was dangerously soft, "my mate's bloodline is irrelevant to her ability to serve. The goddess chose her. That is the only qualification that matters. With all due respect, Your Majesty, the goddess's will is open to interpretation." Thaddeus leaned forward. "The pack has certain expectations, standards that must be maintained." Several other council members shifted uncomfortably, but none contradicted him. Serafina felt heat creeping up her neck, shame and anger warring inside her chest. She was about to speak when Ravenna entered the chamber. "Forgive my tardiness," she said, taking her seat beside her father. Her eyes found Serafina's across the table with a flash of something cold and calculating. "I was detained." Serafina recognized immediately that Ravenna's strategy had evolved. No longer the open rival, now she would play the concerned friend, the helpful advisor, all while undermining Serafina at every turn. Over the following days, the pattern continued. Ravenna appeared everywhere Serafina went, offering advice with a smile that never reached her eyes, pointing out mistakes with false concern, making sure everyone witnessed Serafina's inexperience. "You poor dear," Ravenna said one afternoon as they walked through the palace gardens. "You must feel so overwhelmed, going from planning a simple beta mating to being thrust into royal life with no preparation." "I am managing," Serafina replied carefully. "Of course you are." Ravenna's hand touched her arm with false warmth. "But between us, you must know Lucian only married you out of obligation. Yes, the wedding was already planned. Someone had to fulfill the contract." The words hit exactly where they were meant to hurt. Serafina had wondered the same thing herself during dark moments, had questioned whether Lucian truly wanted her or simply accepted what the goddess provided. "The mate bond," she started, "can form between anyone in close proximity during mating," Ravenna interrupted smoothly. "It does not necessarily indicate true compatibility. I am sure in time, once the initial passion fades, Lucian will take other lovers. Alphas of his status always do." Serafina said nothing, but doubt took root. That night she was quieter than usual when Lucian reached for her, more hesitant. "What is wrong?" he asked, immediately sensing her mood through the bond. "Nothing," she lied. Lucian pulled her to face him. His eyes searched hers in the firelight. "Do not lie to me, Serafina. I can feel your distress. Tell me what happened." She wanted to dismiss it, to pretend Ravenna's words had not affected her, but the bond demanded honesty. "Do you ever regret it?" she whispered. "Taking me as your mate, binding yourself to someone you did not choose." Understanding dawned in Lucian's eyes, followed immediately by fury. "Who put that poison in your head?" he demanded. "Was it Ravenna?" Serafina's silence was answer enough. Lucian cursed viciously in the old language. Then he cupped her face gently, forcing her to meet his gaze. Listen to me very carefully, he said. I did not choose you initially, that is true. But the moment I felt the mate bond spark, I chose you. Every moment since I have chosen you. The goddess brought us together, but I claimed you because I wanted to. Because you are mine. He kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of emotions too complex to name. When he pulled back, his eyes blazed with determination. Ravenna's silver moon is jealous, he said flatly. She wanted to be Luna Queen. She spent years positioning herself for that role, and now a common Omega has taken what she believed was rightfully hers. She said, alphas of your status take lovers. I have no interest in lovers. Lucian's voice was hard. You are my mate, my queen. The only female I want in my bed. Ravenna can spread whatever poison she likes. It does not change the truth. He proved his words by making love to her with a tenderness that spoke of emotions deeper than just physical desire, showing her with his body what his words could not fully express. But the damage was done. Doubt had taken root in Serafina's heart, and doubt was a poison that spread slowly through even the strongest foundations. 2 months into their marriage, Serafina woke feeling violently ill. She barely made it to the bathing chamber before emptying the contents of her stomach into the basin. Her entire body shook with the force of it. Lucian was there immediately, holding her hair back, supporting her with gentle hands. I am calling the healer, he said firmly when the nausea finally passed. Serafina wanted to protest that it was unnecessary, probably just something she ate, but deep down she already knew. The healer confirmed it an hour later. Congratulations, Your Majesty. The elderly Omega smiled warmly. You are with child, approximately 2 months along based on the signs. Joy exploded through Serafina's chest, followed immediately by terror. A child. She was going to have Lucian's child. The healer's expression shifted slightly as she examined Serafina more closely, her hands pressed gently against Serafina's still flat stomach. The child is strong, she said slowly. Unusually strong for Omega bloodline. I can already feel the life force pulsing. This will be a powerful heir. Something in her tone made Serafina's skin prickle with awareness. Is something wrong? No, no. The healer shook her head quickly. Just unexpected, but good, very good. When Lucian returned to their chambers that evening, Serafina told him immediately. His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He dropped to his knees before her, pressed his face against her still flat stomach, with an expression of wonder that made tears spring to her eyes. A pup, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. Our pup, the physical manifestation of this bond between us. He looked up at her with eyes that shone with unshed tears. Thank you, Serafina. Thank you for being brave enough to accept me, for opening your heart to this bond, for giving me everything I never knew I needed. She ran her fingers through his dark hair, overwhelmed by love for this male who had awakened every part of her. But their joy was short-lived. The council's reaction to the pregnancy announcement was decidedly mixed. Half the members offered genuine congratulations, pledged their support for the coming heir. The other half, led by Elder Thaddeus, expressed concern. I do not question the goddess's wisdom, Thaddeus said during the emergency session called to discuss the pregnancy. But we must be practical. The child may not survive to term, and even if it does, we have no precedent for an Omega of common lineage bearing the heir to 5 packs. The healer said the child is unusually strong. Lucian countered, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Healers can be mistaken. Thaddeus's expression was grave. I am simply advising caution, Your Majesty. We should prepare for all eventualities. The implication was clear. They wanted Serafina to fail, wanted the pregnancy to end so Lucian would be free to take a different mate, a stronger mate. Serafina felt sick, and when Ravenna approached her after the meeting with false sympathy dripping from every word, the poison spread deeper. You poor thing, Ravenna cooed, the pressure you must be under to produce a viable heir when your bloodline is so uncertain. I do hope the stress does not affect the pregnancy. The words were carefully chosen, designed to increase anxiety rather than alleviate it. That night, Serafina dreamed of losing the baby, of her body failing the one task that mattered most. She woke gasping. Lucian held her while she cried, but he could not banish the fear that had taken root. The poison attempt happened in the 4th month. Serafina was having tea with several high-born females in the formal receiving room, a weekly ritual meant to build connections with the pack's elite. Ravenna was there, of course, pouring tea with practiced grace. Serafina took a sip and immediately tasted something wrong, bitter beneath the honey sweetness. She set the cup down carefully, but her hands had already begun to shake. Within minutes, cramps seized her abdomen, sharp and vicious, exactly where the baby was growing. "Something is wrong," she gasped, doubling over. Ravenna was at her side instantly, all false concern. "Someone call the healer. The Luna Queen is unwell." But Serafina saw it. Just for a moment, the flash of satisfaction in Ravenna's eyes before the mask of concern slid into place. She did this. Lucian arrived before the healer, took one look at Serafina's pale face and the cup of tea on the table and went absolutely feral. His roar shook the palace foundations. "Who gave her that tea?" The females scattered like frightened birds, all except Ravenna, who stood her ground with impressive composure. "I poured it myself, Your Majesty. From the same pot we all drank from. I cannot imagine." Silence. Lucian's alpha command hit like a physical force. Ravenna's jaw snapped shut mid-sentence. He gathered Serafina into his arms and carried her to their chambers, barking orders for the healer, for guards to secure the receiving room and everyone in it. The healer worked for hours, using every herb and technique in her considerable arsenal to stop the cramping, to save the pregnancy. Finally, as dawn broke, she pronounced both mother and child stable. "The poison was nightshade," she said grimly, "enough to cause a miscarriage, but not enough to kill the mother. Someone wanted the pregnancy ended without leaving obvious evidence of murder." Lucian's hands shook with the effort of controlling his rage. "The tea," Serafina whispered. Her voice was weak but certain. "Ravenna poured it. She was the only one who touched my cup specifically." The investigation that followed was swift and thorough. They found nightshade powder hidden in Ravenna's chambers, found correspondence with a rogue herbalist, found evidence of payments made to secure the poison. Ravenna denied everything, of course, claimed she was being framed. But the evidence was damning. Elder Silvermoon tried to protect his daughter, argued for leniency, suggested house arrest rather than exile. Lucian's response was ice cold. "Your daughter attempted to murder my heir, to poison my mate. The only reason she still breathes is because Serafina survived." He turned to address the assembled council. "Lady Ravenna Silvermoon is hereby stripped of all rank and title. She is banished from the Northern Territories. If she sets foot on our lands again, the penalty is death." Ravenna's composure finally cracked. She screamed her fury as guards dragged her from the hall. "She does not deserve you. She is common weak. I would have given you strong heirs. She will only bring shame to your bloodline." The doors slammed shut on her rage. Serafina watched it all from Lucian's side, feeling vindicated and horrified in equal measure. Ravenna had tried to kill her baby, had poisoned her out of jealousy and thwarted ambition. And now she was gone. But the victory felt hollow, because Elder Thaddeus and his supporters remained, still watching, still waiting for Serafina to fail. The pregnancy progressed carefully after that. Serafina was confined to bed rest for 2 weeks, monitored constantly by healers, protected by guards who had been personally vetted by Lucian. He barely left her side during that time, working from their chambers, sleeping with one hand always resting protectively on her growing belly. The bond between them deepened through the crisis. Serafina finally understanding the depths of Lucian's devotion, his willingness to burn down the world to keep her safe, and Lucian seeing her strength. The way she had survived poison meant to destroy her, the fierce protection she already felt for their unborn child. By the 5th month, Serafina was showing noticeably, her belly rounded with new life. Lucian was obsessed with it, constantly touching her stomach, talking to the baby, making plans for their future. But concerns remained. The healer continued to comment on the unusual strength of the child, the way it moved with power that should not be possible yet, the intensity of its life force. "I have delivered hundreds of babies in my years," she said during one examination, "but I have never felt anything quite like this. Your child is exceptional." Something in her tone made Serafina's instincts prickle. "What are you not telling me?" The healer hesitated, then reached for an ancient text she had brought. "There are legends," she said slowly, "of a bloodline thought extinct, the Lunaris sovereignty, royal Omegas who ruled before the current pack system. They were said to produce children of extraordinary power." She showed Serafina an illustration, an Omega with eyes that glowed gold, bearing a mark on her shoulder, a crescent moon intertwined with stars. These Omegas were hunted to extinction centuries ago. Their power threatened the new Alpha hierarchy, but legends suggest some survived, went into hiding, diluted their bloodline over generations to escape detection. Serafina's hand moved unconsciously to her shoulder, where a birthmark she had always dismissed as ordinary rested beneath her clothing. The healer's eyes widened. "May I see?" With shaking hands, Serafina lowered her dress enough to reveal the mark. The healer gasped. There, on Serafina's pale skin, was the exact symbol from the ancient text, a crescent moon intertwined with stars. It cannot be, the healer breathed. You are Lunaris, direct descendant of the moon sovereignty. The revelation crashed over Serafina like a tidal wave. She was not common Omega. She was royalty, ancient, powerful royalty that had been hidden for centuries. Does Lucian know? The healer asked urgently. No, I did not know myself. I thought it was just a birthmark. The child's strength makes sense now. Lunaris bloodline mixing with Alpha King power. This baby will be extraordinary. The healer's expression turned grave. But you must be careful who learns of this. The bloodline was hunted for a reason. There are still those who would see it destroyed. As if summoned by the warning, cramping seized Serafina's abdomen. Sharp and vicious. Nothing like before. The baby, she gasped. Something is wrong. The healer's hands pressed against her stomach. Her face went pale. You are going into labor, but it is too early. Only 7 months. The child is not ready. Pain ripped through Serafina. Her water broke in a rush of fluid. Get the king, the healer barked at the guards. Now! The next hours were a nightmare of pain and fear. Lucian arrived to find Serafina screaming through contractions that should not be happening yet. The baby fighting to be born too soon. You have to stop it, he commanded the healer desperately. The child will not survive if it comes now. I cannot stop what has already begun. The healer's hands worked frantically. All I can do is help it survive. The labor was brutal, Serafina's body tearing as it struggled to birth a child too large for her small frame, blood soaking through the linens faster than servants could replace them. She was dying. Lucian knew it even before the healer confirmed it. The bleeding will not stop, the old Omega said quietly, even if we save the child, the mother. No! Lucian's roar shook the chamber. He climbed onto the bed beside Serafina, pulled her into his arms. You are not leaving me, he growled against her ear. Do you hear me? We are fated. The goddess did not bring us together just to tear us apart. Through the bond, Serafina felt him gathering his alpha life force, felt him preparing to do something that would either save her or kill them both. Lucian, no, she whispered weakly. The baby needs you. If I die. You are not dying. He bit down on his own wrist, drew blood, then pressed the wound to her lips. Drink. Alpha blood was powerful, could heal wounds, strengthen the weak, but giving too much could drain the donor to the point of death. Serafina tried to turn her head away, but Lucian held her firm. Drink, she obeyed. His blood flooded her mouth, hot and metallic and thrumming with power. She felt it racing through her veins, knitting torn tissue, strengthening failing organs. The baby crowned with a final push. And then a cry filled the chamber. Strong, healthy, furious at being forced into the world too soon. A son, the healer announced, tears streaming down her face. You have a son, your majesties. She placed the baby on Serafina's chest, and Serafina saw through blurring vision that he was perfect, small but strong, already trying to lift his head. His eyes opened briefly and flashed gold. Lunaris gold, confirming what the healer had discovered. But Lucian collapsed beside her, his face ashen. He had given too much blood, weakened himself critically to save her. No, Serafina sobbed, trying to reach for him. No, please, Lucian. His eyes fluttered. Through the bond, she felt his consciousness slipping. Worth it, he whispered. You and our son. Worth everything. Then his eyes closed, and the Alpha King fell into a coma from which he might never wake. The Alpha King lay motionless in their bed. 3 days had passed since Lucian collapsed. 3 days since he had given so much of his life force to save Serafina that his own body shut down in self-preservation. 3 days since their son was born. Serafina sat beside her mate, one hand holding his, the other cradling the small bundle against her chest. The baby, they had named him Cassian, nursed contentedly, oblivious to the crisis surrounding his birth. Healers came and went, checking Lucian's vital signs, monitoring his breathing, trying every remedy in their considerable arsenal. Nothing worked. The Alpha King remained trapped in a coma, his body present, but his consciousness somewhere unreachable. Through the mate bond, Serafina could feel him, a distant flicker, like a candle flame viewed from miles away. He was alive, but barely. Your Majesty, the elderly healer's voice was gentle. You need to rest. You nearly died 3 days ago. Your body needs time to recover. I am fine, Serafina replied automatically. It was a lie. Her body ached. The birth had torn her in ways that would take weeks to fully heal. Blood loss had left her weak and dizzy, and the emotional toll of watching Lucian waste away while she recovered was destroying her. But she could not rest, because the vultures were circling. Elder Thaddeus had called an emergency council session for that afternoon, and Seraphina knew exactly what he intended. With the Alpha King incapacitated, someone needed to rule, and Thaddeus would argue that a common Omega who had just given birth was unfit for that responsibility. He would try to install himself as regent, or worse, declare the mating void and install a new Alpha entirely. Seraphina looked down at Cassian, at his tiny fist curled against her chest, at the shock of dark hair so like his father's. She would not let anyone take this from them. Not the throne, not their son's birthright, not the bond that had nearly killed them both to preserve. Send word to the council, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. I will attend the session as planned. The healer looked alarmed. Your Majesty, you cannot possibly. I can, and I will. The council chamber fell silent when Seraphina entered. She wore formal robes that concealed how weak she still was, had her hair dressed in elaborate braids that disguised 3 days without proper rest, held herself with a dignity that denied the pain radiating through her healing body. Cassian was strapped against her chest in traditional Omega carrying wraps, sleeping peacefully, despite the tension in the room. Every council member rose as she entered a show of respect for the Luna Queen. All except Elder Thaddeus. He remained seated at the far end of the table. His expression was carefully neutral, but Seraphina saw the calculation in his eyes. He had been waiting for this moment, for Lucian to be vulnerable, for an opportunity to seize power. Your Majesty, Thaddeus's voice dripped with false concern. You should not have left your recovery, Bem. Your health. My health is my own concern. Seraphina took her seat at the head of the table. Lucian's seat. I am here to address the concerns regarding the kingdom's leadership during the Alpha King's temporary incapacity. Temporary. Thaddeus seized on the word like a wolf on wounded prey. Forgive my bluntness, Your Majesty, but the king has been unconscious for 3 days. The healers offer no timeline for recovery. For all we know, he may never wake. Several council members shifted uncomfortably, but none contradicted him. The Alpha King gave his life force to save mine, Seraphina said quietly. His body needs time to regenerate what was lost. He will wake. You cannot know that. Thaddeus leaned forward. And in the meantime, the Northern Territories require leadership. Real leadership. Not forgive me, a newly made Omega still recovering from a difficult birth. There it was, the challenge laid bare. What are you proposing, Elder Thaddeus? Seraphina kept her voice level. A Regency Council, experienced alphas who can manage the territory's affairs until the king recovers. Or until, he paused delicately, alternative arrangements can be made. Alternative arrangements? Seraphina repeated the words flatly. You mean installing a new Alpha King? Thaddeus spread his hands. I mean ensuring the stability of our territories. Your son is too young to rule. You are too inexperienced. Without the king, we are vulnerable to challenges from rival packs. He was right about that much. News of Lucian's condition would spread quickly. Rival alphas would see opportunity, would test their borders, would probe for weakness. I agree that we are vulnerable, Seraphina said, which is why I will be assuming full leadership responsibilities until my mate recovers. The chamber erupted. Half the council members began talking at once, some in support, most in opposition. Thaddeus's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. You cannot seriously expect this council to accept an Omega, a common Omega at that, as acting ruler of 5 packs. The goddess accepted me as Luna Queen. Seraphina's voice was steel beneath silk. Are you questioning her wisdom, Elder Thaddeus? I am questioning circumstances that grow more questionable by the day. His eyes narrowed. Healers talk, Your Majesty, about your son's unusual strength, about eyes that flash gold, about ancient bloodlines that were destroyed for threatening the natural order. Seraphina's blood ran cold. He knew. Somehow Thaddeus had learned about her Lunaris heritage. I have no idea what you mean, she said carefully. Do you not? Thaddeus pulled out an ancient text, the same one the healer had shown her. Lunaris sovereignty, royal Omegas who wielded power that rivaled Alpha Kings, who could command packs with nothing but their will. He opened the book to the illustration, the Omega with golden eyes and the crescent moon mark. The healers whisper about a birthmark on your shoulder, one that matches this symbol exactly. Seraphina said nothing. Cassian stirred against her chest, making small sounds in his sleep. If you possess Lunaris blood, Thaddeus continued, then this council has been deceived from the beginning. Your mating to the king was arranged under false pretenses. I hid nothing. Seraphina's voice was cold fury. I did not know my own heritage until after my son was born. The bloodline was diluted over generations, hidden to protect survivors from males like you, who saw strength in omegas as corruption rather than blessing. So you admit it. Thaddeus looked triumphant. You are Lunaris, ancient royalty pretending to be common omega. I am both. Seraphina stood despite the pain that shot through her healing body. I am descended from the moon sovereignty, and I am common omega who was forced to replace a dead bride. These truths do not contradict each other. Well, she moved around the table toward Thaddeus, each step deliberate, powerful. My bloodline explains why my son is strong, why I survived a birth that should have killed me, why the mate bond with Lucian formed so intensely. She stopped directly before the elder. It does not invalidate our mating, it confirms it. The council will never accept. The council does not have a choice. The voice came from the doorway, every head turned. Lucian stood there, leaning heavily against the doorframe. His face was pale, his body clearly weak, but his eyes blazed with silver fire. Lucian, Seraphina, started toward him, but he held up a hand. Stay. His voice was rough from disuse. Let them see their Luna Queen. Let them see the female who rules in my stead. He pushed off the doorframe and walked into the chamber. Each step clearly cost him, but he made it to the table and placed both hands flat on the surface. My mate is Lunaris, he said, addressing the assembled council. Direct descendant of the most powerful Omega bloodline in history. She did not hide this. She did not know it herself until the goddess revealed it through our son. He looked at each council member in turn. The goddess orchestrated everything. Kieran Thorne's death. The wedding that could not be canceled. My decision to take his place. The mate bond that formed the instant I touched her. His gaze settled on Thaddeus. All of it was designed to bring together two bloodlines that would produce the most powerful heir our territories have ever seen. Your Majesty, Thaddeus started, but Lucian cut him off. I am not finished. The alpha command in those 4 words made every wolf in the room submit instinctively. Seraphina will rule beside me, not as common Omega, not as hidden royalty, but as my equal, my fated mate, my Luna Queen. He straightened despite the visible effort it cost him. And anyone who questions her right to that position questions me. Silence filled the chamber. Then slowly Elder Silvermoon rose. Ravenna's father, the male who had lost his daughter to exile. I support the Luna Queen, he said quietly. My daughter's crimes do not change the truth. The mate bond is sacred, and Seraphina has proven her strength. One by one other council members stood, pledging their support, acknowledging Seraphina's right to rule, until only Thaddeus remained seated. This is unprecedented, he said. Omegas do not rule. They serve. This goes against everything. Careful, Elder Thaddeus. Lucian's voice was deadly soft. Finish that sentence, and you will find yourself joining Lady Ravenna in exile. Thaddeus's jaw worked, but finally, reluctantly, he stood. I acknowledge the Luna Queen's right to rule. The words were dragged from him, but they were enough. Lucian swayed. Seraphina was at his side, immediately supporting his weight. You should not be out of bed, she whispered urgently. I felt your distress through the bond. His hand cupped her face gently. Did you think I would let them tear you down while I slept? He had woken up for her, had dragged himself from unconsciousness because she needed him. Take me home, he murmured. Our son needs to meet his father properly. Lucian's recovery took weeks. The healers marveled at his progress. The mate bond with Seraphina seemed to accelerate his healing. Energy flowed between them constantly, her strength supplementing his depleted reserves. By the time Cassian was 6 weeks old, Lucian could walk without assistance. By 2 months, he was attending council meetings again, his body regenerating what he had given to save his mate. During this time, Seraphina ruled. She made decisions that slowly earned the council's grudging respect, reformed laws that had oppressed lower-ranking Omegas, established trade agreements with neighboring packs, proved that her Lunaris heritage made her stronger, not dangerous. And through it all, Lucian supported her publicly while recovering privately. Their bond deepened through the crisis, forged in blood, in sacrifice, in absolute devotion. When Cassian was 3 months old, Lucian announced a formal coronation ceremony. You were named Luna Queen at our wedding, he explained. But you never received the crown, never had your bloodline and position acknowledged before the territories. Is that necessary, Seraphina, he asked. The council has accepted me. Grudgingly, fearfully. His eyes met hers. I want them to see you for what you truly are. Not common Omega hiding in plain sight. Not dangerous Lunaris pretending to be weak, but the perfect combination of both. My equal in every way. The ceremony was planned for the full moon, when all 5 packs would gather to witness. Over 1,000 wolves assembled in the great courtyard. More than had attended the wedding. Representatives from every corner of the northern territories. Seraphina stood beside Lucian on the raised platform, wearing robes of silver and white that caught the moonlight. Her hair unbound and flowing, Cassian sleeping peacefully in a cradle nearby, watched over by trusted guards. Lucian addressed the assembled masses first. 7 months ago, I took a mate under extraordinary circumstances. His voice carried across the silent crowd. A common Omega, forced to replace a dead groom, married to a king she had never met. He turned to look at Seraphina. I thought I was accepting obligation, fulfilling duty. I was wrong. His hand found hers. The goddess knew what I needed before I did. She brought me the one female in all existence who was my perfect match, my fated mate, my equal in strength, in courage, and heart. He gestured to the ancient text that had been displayed for all to see. You have learned that my mate is Lunaris, descended from the moon sovereignty, and I have heard the whispers, the fear that this bloodline makes her dangerous. His eyes swept the crowd. You are right to respect her power, but wrong about what that power represents. The Lunaras were not destroyed because they were evil. They were hunted because males could not accept that Omegas could be strong, could rule, could match alphas in power. He lifted the Luna Queen crown, ancient silver wrought with moonstones and diamonds. It had sat unused for 3 generations. Seraphina is not common. She is not hidden royalty pretending to be weak. She is both, and that makes her stronger than any Luna Queen who came before. He placed the crown on her head. The weight settled against her skull, like it had always belonged there. I present to you, Lucian's voice rang out, Luna Queen Seraphina of the Lunaris bloodline, my mate, my equal, your queen. The pack erupted in howls of acknowledgement, and through the noise, through the celebration, Seraphina saw Thaddeus in the crowd. He was kneeling like everyone else. His expression was resigned acceptance rather than joy, but he was kneeling. Then Lucian guided her to the front of the platform, where a smaller crowd waited. Kieran's family. His parents stood there elderly and worn. They had lost their only son, had blamed Seraphina initially for living when he died. Kieran's mother stepped forward, tears streaming down her weathered face. Your Majesty, she said quietly, we owe you an apology. When Kieran died, we thought you were inadequate for him, too common, too weak. She bowed her head. We were blind. You were never meant for our son. You were destined for a king, and we are grateful that his death freed you to find your true mate. It was forgiveness Seraphina had not expected, had not thought she needed, but hearing it lifted a weight she had not known she carried. Your son was a good male, Seraphina said gently. His death was tragic, but you are right, the goddess had different plans for both of us. After the ceremony, after the celebrations died down, Lucian led her back to their chambers. Cassian was already asleep in his cradle tended by nurses. They had the night to themselves. Lucian undressed her slowly, reverently. His hands traced the crown still resting on her head. My queen, he murmured, my equal, my everything. He made love to her with a tenderness that spoke of emotions too deep for words, showing her that the passion between them had not faded despite the trials. That desire only grew stronger with every obstacle overcome, and Seraphina surrendered completely, knowing she was safe, cherished, claimed by the one male who saw all of her, common and royal, weak and strong, and loved every contradiction. 10 years passed in what felt like heartbeats. Cassian grew into a strong, intelligent boy with his father's build and his mother's golden eyes. His Lunaris heritage manifested in small ways, unusually quick, healing the ability to sense emotions through touch, a natural authority that made even adult wolves defer to him. 2 more children followed. A daughter named Liana who inherited Seraphina's platinum hair and Lucian's silver eyes, and a younger son, Matthias, who looked like a perfect blend of both parents. Seraphina ruled beside Lucian with confidence and grace. The reforms she implemented transformed the northern territories. Omegas who had been oppressed gained rights and protections. Trade flourished. The packs prospered under their joint leadership. And through it all, the passion between them never dimmed. Lucian still made her scream his name in the darkness of their chambers, still claimed her with the same intensity he had shown on their wedding night, still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. On their 10th anniversary, he gave her a necklace, The pendant was shaped like a wolf's head, with eyes made of rare blue diamonds that matched his own eyes perfectly. 10 years ago, he said as he fastened it around her neck, I claimed a terrified virgin who believed she was nobody. Tonight I celebrate the incredible woman she became. He pulled her into his arms. You are my mate, my equal, my reason for everything. They made love that night with the familiarity of a decade together, but the passion of new lovers, proving that true bonds only grew stronger with time. 20 years brought new challenges. Cassian came of age and began training to eventually take his father's throne. Lyanna showed unexpected diplomatic talent, brokering peace agreements that had eluded elder wolves. Matthias developed military strategy skills that surpassed his father's. Seraphina watched her children grow with pride and bittersweetness. They were becoming their own people, strong and capable, and ready to leave the nest. Lucian held her through the emotional moments, reminding her that their purpose had been to raise wolves who could change the world. And they had succeeded. Elder Thaddeus retired from the council. His last act was acknowledging publicly that he had been wrong about Seraphina, that her Lunaris heritage had made the territories stronger, not weaker. It was as close to an apology as the proud elder would ever give. On their 20th anniversary, Lucian took Seraphina to a place she had never been, a cave in the northern wilderness. This is where wounded wolves come to die, he explained as they entered, or to be saved. Inside, he showed her the spot where he had fought rogues 20 years ago, where he had been wounded and left for dead before managing to crawl to safety. I was coming back from that battle, he said quietly, when I heard about Kieran Thorne's death. I was bleeding and exhausted and in pain. But the moment I heard about the wedding that could not be canceled, I knew the goddess was calling me. He pulled her close. This is where it began, where I chose to live instead of die, because somewhere my mate was waiting for me. They made love in that cave, reclaiming the space where destiny had first whispered Lucian's name. And Seraphina understood that love was not a destination. It was a journey that deepened with every shared moment, every trial overcome, every choice to choose each other again and again. 30 years brought grandchildren. Cassian mated with a strong alpha female from the Eastern Territories. Their union produced two sons who inherited both Lunaris and Alphaking bloodlines in equal measure. But it was Lyanna's story that echoed her mother's most completely. At 20 years old, Lyanna was betrothed to Alpha Kalen of the Southern Pax, a political arrangement designed to unite territories. She came to Seraphina in tears the night before her wedding. I do not love him, mother. I barely know him. How can I bind myself to a stranger for life? Seraphina took her daughter's hands, seeing so much of her younger self in Lyanna's frightened eyes. I married your father after knowing him for 15 minutes, she said gently. I was terrified, certain my life was over. I could not have been more wrong. But you had the mate bond. We had a spark, nothing more. The bond formed during our wedding ceremony, but even that was not what made our mating successful. Seraphina smiled. It was choosing each other, every day, through every challenge. That choice is what built our love. What if Kalen is not my fated mate? Then you will build something different, but equally valuable. Seraphina squeezed her daughter's hands. The goddess does not always give us what we think we want. She gives us what we need. Trust her wisdom, trust yourself, and give Kalen a chance to prove himself. Lyanna's wedding mirrored Seraphina's own, a nervous bride, a groom who was essentially a stranger. Vows spoken with trembling voice. But when Kalen kissed his new mate, Seraphina saw it. The spark, the widening of Lyanna's eyes, the way she gasped against his mouth. Mate bond, fated just like Seraphina and Lucian. The goddess had orchestrated another perfect pairing disguised as political arrangement. After the ceremony, Lyanna found her mother in the crowd. Her eyes were shining with wonder and disbelief. You were right, she whispered. He is my fated mate. I felt it the moment he kissed me. The goddess knows what she is doing, Seraphina replied, even when we do not understand her methods. Watching her daughter experience the same journey from fear to wonder to love filled Seraphina with profound gratitude. Her own forced marriage had seemed like a curse, but it had been the greatest blessing of her life, and now her daughter would experience the same transformation. 50 years. Half a century since Seraphina had stood in her childhood bedroom, terrified of marrying a stranger. The anniversary celebration was massive. 4 generations gathered, hundreds of wolves from across the territories, all come to honor the Alpha King and Luna Queen whose bond had become legendary. Seraphina and Lucian stood together on the same platform where she had been crowned 30 years earlier. They were both in their 70s now. Silver streaked through Lucian's dark hair. Fine lines marked the corners of Seraphina's eyes. Their bodies showed the passage of time, but the bond between them burned as bright as ever. Cassian stood beside them with his own mate and children. Liana with Kalen and their growing family. Matthias with the female he had chosen. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren filling the courtyard, a dynasty built from a marriage that neither of them had chosen. Lucian addressed the crowd one final time. 50 years ago, I walked into a stranger's chambers and claimed her as my mate. I thought I was fulfilling obligation, replacing a dead groom to save a family's honor. His hand found Seraphina's, their fingers intertwined with the ease of 5 decades. I did not know I was meeting my other half, my fated mate, the one female who would transform me from a lonely king into a complete male. He turned to face her fully. Kieran Thorne's death was tragic, but it was also necessary. You were never meant for him, Seraphina. You were always meant for me. And every day of these 50 years has proven that the goddess knew exactly what she was doing. Seraphina smiled through tears. I was terrified that first night, she said, addressing the crowd. I thought my life was ending. I thought being forced to marry a stranger was the worst thing that could happen to me. She looked at their children, their grandchildren, the legacy they had built together. I was so wrong. That forced marriage was the beginning of everything. It taught me that love is not always convenient, not always expected, but always worth fighting for. The celebration continued late into the night, but eventually Seraphina and Lucian retired to their chambers, the same rooms they had shared for 50 years, where they had loved and fought and built a life together. Lucian undressed her slowly, his hands still knowing exactly where to touch, how to make her breath catch despite decades of familiarity. 50 years, he murmured against her skin, and I still want you as desperately as I did that first night. He made love to her with the skill of long practice and the passion of new discovery, proving that desire survived age, that true mates only grew closer with time. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness. Do you ever regret it? Seraphina asked quietly. Taking on a bride you did not choose, never. Lucian's voice was absolute certainty. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. The goddess knew exactly what she was doing when she formed our mate bond. He kissed her forehead gently. Kieran's death freed you to find me. Your forced marriage became our destiny. And every moment since has been exactly what we both needed. Seraphina smiled in the darkness. She had been nobody. Common Omega forced to replace a dead bride, terrified and alone and certain her life was over. But she had survived, had loved, had built a dynasty that would last for generations, all because one Alpha King had walked into her room and seen not a replacement, not an obligation, but his fated mate, true love, eternal bond. A gift from the goddess wrapped in tragedy and fear. And Seraphina would spend the rest of her life grateful for every moment that had led her exactly where she belonged, in the arms of her Alpha King, her fated mate, her love.